by The Big Gouda, Michael Gudadero. You can find us on Twitter at Bankster17, at The Big Gouda. You can find us on YouTube, Doug Shane. Just look me up and click the like button, the share button, the subscribe button, and click that notification icon so that you know when we go live, when we have videos. Go live every Friday night, 7 o'clock Eastern, and every Sunday morning, 11:30 a.m. on the East Coast, leading you up to the NFL kickoff. You can also find all of our work at banksterdfs.com. $3.99 a week gets you access to everything that we do. All our articles, player pools. You get our Slack chat, the best Slack chat in the business. We cover everything. NBA went live today. We had NBA preseasons happening tonight. I'm sure the guys are talking about it in Slack right now. I saw it today. I was waiting for the NBA talk, and they're still pumping EuroLeague. Brandon, the team, we're still killing it with EuroLeague today. We got it all. We've got our soccer, our golf, our hockey, our baseball, our basketball, our football, everything. Cover it all. $3.99 a week. Articles, pool, Slack chat. But enough about that. Let's talk football, and let's talk Michael Gudadero. Guda, how you doing this week? What's going on? What are we looking for in the NFL this week?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Excited. Another week. The season is slowly winding down here. We're getting to the finish line, surprisingly enough, with very little hiccups. I'm pretty pleased with how the NFL has handled this, aside from a couple of little hiccups there. But yeah, congratulations to everybody that is in their fantasy playoffs, and any of our members out there listening, you need help with lineup decisions or anything this week, hit me up in the Slack chat. I'm happy to help you. Hopefully, get you to a league title and maybe even something bigger. But yeah, with this week, on the DFS slate, we've got another interesting one. I mean, the end of the year always brings some intrigue with some different viable players, guys that are standing out that you didn't think would be doing much this year, like a Corey Davis, for instance, who's been a top 20 receiver this year, and shocking, right?
Dude. I love Davis. Love Davis.
So, so we're actually at a point this week where two of our three mainstays on Don't Pay Up For, we're actually in the conversation of paying up this week. And as we do, we start at the quarterback spot. And really, to me, on the quarterback side, I think there's really only in cash two guys that I'm confident in having in there this week, and that's Russell Wilson and Justin Herbert. The three other guys on the list, Tannehill, I think, is an extremely strong GPP play this week. I don't know if I can trust them just enough for cash, because there's always that Derrick Henry in the background, that if the Titans take the lead and if the Titans play the way that they kind of want to play, the Titans will, can win this game, and Henry runs it 30 times and Tannehill passes it 25 times. That's not something you really want for cash. And then Dalton and Glennon, they're priced down. They don't need much to hit value. Dalton just hasn't done much with the starting job, and I always worry with quarterbacks on the road at times. And Glennon's been okay. He's not afraid to throw it around and all that. But Glennon's stat line was a little misleading last week for those that didn't see. It should have been an interception, and it went through, bounced off of one Vikings defender and through a second Vikings defender hand, and it just landed in the lap of Chenault in the end zone. So Glennon's day should have been a little worse than what the final numbers really were.
It's just the power of Glennon. That's all it is. It's just Glennon being Glennon. It's gunslinger.
But with that, my decision is down to, it's either Wilson or Herbert. On Wilson's end, there's not much I need to say about the Jets defense here. They've been attacked through the air the past couple of weeks, and it's been horrific watching it. Especially after the way that they lost last week. The most typical Jets fashion that you could envision.
Oh my goodness!
And they've been getting torched through the air. Seattle has been struggling a little bit, and they need to get right. And who better to get right against than the Jets? They even was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, Pierre Desir, who was their starting cornerback, they just kind of cut out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Didn't even bench him; they just cut him. So, they have lost the starter there, and just the secondary, they have nothing to write home about. So it's a pretty easy matchup there for Wilson. And then Herbert, kind of the same story. You know, the Falcons defense, while they've been quote unquote good the past 3 weeks, if you dig into the numbers, they really haven't been. You know, let's see where I have my so here we go. So if we for these purposes, the past 3 weeks, the Vegas game, I would say was more fluky than not, just with that,
Super fluky.
Yeah, traveling to the East Coast, and the Raiders just weren't ready for it. They barely got off the plane. It was just one of those. And if you evaluate the two other Saints games that the Falcons played against, they gave up 400 total yards in each game. And they, the point totals were a little low, but the Saints offense controlled those games. You know, it's a very different Saints run offense with Taysom Hill in there. And if they had converted, a couple of plays, New Orleans is easy over 30 points in both of those games. So, with the total yards that they're giving up and everything, and let's not forget what they did earlier in the year, giving up 21 points in 8 of 9 games and 300 yards passing in those 8 of 9 games as well. I think this is a great bounce back spot for Herbert too. And again, against the bad Falcons defense, and also too, one thing that people don't talk about as often. It's just as hard traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast as it is doing the West Coast to the East Coast game. Especially with COVID, there's a lot less travel, and these guys are flying out a little bit later in the day on Saturdays, if not extremely early on Sunday morning, to avoid being out there too long. That takes a big toll. That's a big adjustment, getting off your normal cycles, different time zones, and all that. So I think Herbert's a very strong play in that situation too. And again, I brought this up on the live stream last week while I was off of Herbert, and it happened to play out perfectly. Belichick just has the numbers of rookie quarterbacks. It just happens. It doesn't matter who the guy is. We saw him do. I mean, look at Peyton Manning, arguably, the second best quarterback of all time, if not the best quarterback of all time. And Bill Belichick consistently owned him. He had his number, and it just happened. And that's what we saw last week with Herbert. I don't read too much into that game. It was going to happen eventually. So I just kind of throw that one out the window. And I think Herbert's very viable this week because he's, they're giving him the keys. Go out, kid, do what you got to do. And, you got to throw it 35, 40 times. Go for it. We want to win, and you're the guy to lead us there.
I was on Herbert as my cash quarterback early in the week. I've since pivoted off to Wilson for a couple of reasons. I do agree. And part of the process today, guys, is that we're going to modify the cash pool as we go. That's part of what we're doing with our shared knowledge and our conversation. I'm definitely pulling Tannehill off for all the same reasons that Gouda talked about. In that same price point, I'd rather use Herbert in cash, because if it becomes a real running game, because Jacksonville does struggle against the rush as well, if that's a running game, then Tannehill could really disappoint at his price point. Herbert is, I think, less likely to do that. And I don't know. I think the Dallas Cincinnati game, I think with the Andy Dalton revenge game narrative, I do think at $5,500, the talented wide receivers, if you're going to spend down at quarterback, I just think it's too good of a spot to pull off my pool completely. And I feel the same way about Glennon. Tennessee is really bad against opposing quarterbacks and opposing receivers. And Glennon is going to chuck it. He's going to throw it. He's thrown it 77 times in 2 games. I think the volume is there. He's not the most efficient quarterback, but it's just hard to pull him off because I think he's going to throw another 35-ish times in this game. But I do think when we start to look at the preferred plays and the way that we're configuring our cash game lineups as we get through it, we should have enough money to be able to afford one of the top-end quarterbacks. Here's why I'm going Wilson over Herbert at this point. I would argue to say last week was not necessarily a complete anomaly. I do think that we could argue Herbert has had 3 bad games in 4 games in his last 4 starts. A ton of volume against New England Buffalo, and didn't do a ton with it. 20 points in last week's game, ridiculous. But 4 weeks ago against Miami, which is another strong defense, I get it. Only 187 yards and 2 touchdowns, 21 points. Got there because he scored a rushing TD, which is just not going to happen all that often with Herbert. I know he runs a little bit, but he's not really a big-time rushing quarterback. So now we're looking at the fact that he's had 2 passing touchdowns twice, 2 or more passing touchdowns twice in the last 4 weeks, and now he's gone back-to-back weeks with only 1 passing touchdown or less. The 300-yard plateau, he did hit in 2 of those games, but again, it took 52 attempts to get there, and he was under 60% completion. yes, Atlanta is not a good defense. They gave up 300 yards in 8 of their first 9 games, but they've got Raheem Morris now in there, and Raheem Morris as their coach, and he is a defensive coach, and maybe he's made some changes. I get that the game was a little bit of an anomaly against the Raiders, and I get that the Saints are not using a real quarterback, Taysom Hill, but Atlanta's pass it's looking a little bit better. They had the one side against Carolina. I know they gave up 313 against Denver, but again, that was a ton of volume. Atlanta got up pretty early in that game, and they just kept throwing. So and Atlanta's become more aggressive in the backfield with their sacks just increasing and being in a place where they're actually getting in the backfield quite a bit. I just think it's more likely that Herbert is going to struggle than Russell Wilson. And before I hear the arguments, I know what you're saying. Well, Doug, Russell Wilson has struggled 3 straight weeks too. Yeah, he has a lot more history than Justin Herbert for what he's done in his career. I get that it's actually 4 weeks in a row now that Russell Wilson struggled. So, mythical person who's yelling at me, you were wrong, even though it was me saying it. People seem to get right against the Jets. As Guido alluded to, everyone's throwing for a ton of yards against New York. Doesn't matter how many points they're favored by. People are just unloading on New York, and the Jets have been just plucky enough to keep teams throwing. And here's where I think Wilson, first of all, I think he's a $9K quarterback priced at $7,900 after a couple of, after 4 really bad weeks. 4 touchdowns in 4 weeks is just not where he should be at. But we saw earlier in the year, he was just throwing 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 4, 5. I mean, so many touchdowns. And the Jets are the best get-right defense in the league. On top of that, the Seahawks are trying to make a push to win their division. You've got Russell Wilson trying to make a push to get at least one MVP vote. That would be wonderful. How is he going to do it? He's going to do it by running the table, including beating the Rams a couple of weeks from now. And if he could put up 15 touchdowns, now he's approaching 45, 46, 47 touchdowns for the year. If he starts to approach 50 touchdowns and he runs the table here for Seattle to go 12-4, if they can win their division, and somehow, if New Orleans loses a couple games, get a first-round bye, if they pass Green Bay. I know there's a lot of what-ifs here, but it starts with this game, and this is the game to do it. Could he have a Mahomes-like game where he puts up 4 touchdowns or 5 touchdowns and 300, 400 yards? It could happen. Chris Carson's not getting as much volume. I know Pete Carroll said he's going to get his normal workload, but he does catch some passes, and Russell Wilson just loves to throw the football down in the red zone. He's got the guys to do it. I mean, DK Metcalf's unstoppable. Tyler Lockett is really good in the red zone, and Will Dissly hopefully has himself a good game against the Jets, who are the worst team in the league against opposing tight ends. I just think this game sets up real nicely for Russell Wilson to do the things he needs to do to get himself back in the MVP talk, to have that kind of season he needs, because that MVP talk does matter to Russell Wilson. I know he's humble, but I don't care how humble he is. That matters, and it bothers him. He's never gotten an MVP vote, and they've got to make a run. They want this division. And the Rams came out, put up a huge win last night against the Patriots. I do think that Russell Wilson and the Seahawks are going to look to try to at least equal that, if not top it. And I don't think it's going to be by doing what the Rams did, by running it down the Patriots' throat. I think Russell's going to take over this game. And, I mean, geez, I know he needs 32 points to hit 4X, but I just think he's got that ability to do it. And when you look at some of the other top-end quarterbacks, Mahomes has a really rough matchup. It's only $200 more, but Miami's a tough matchup for him. I just think Wilson is just in a better spot to put up a bigger game than Mahomes this week. So that's where I'm going. And I can afford him. I don't like spending up a quarterback, but I can afford him, so I'm going to use him in this spot because, when I really thought about it, he was the guy I wanted. I just hate spending up that much. But again, when you configure your lineups the way that I've configured mine, and I can still have a Devontae Adams and an Austin Eckler and not feel too uncomfortable with the rest of my team, I think Russell Wilson makes a lot of sense this week. Sometimes we just break our rules, and this is one of those weeks we spend up a quarterback. And it sounds like Guda's in the same boat. He might be on. I don't know. Are you more Herbert or are you more?
In a bubble, I like Wilson better. I do think he's a better play. I was talking about the two of them just because there's significant savings from Wilson to Herbert. Like if you're looking to do something different in your lineup and you have Herbert in there, the extra $1,100 does go a long way. And one more thing to your Jets passing point. I mean,
I need you to start referring to them, though, Guda, as my Jets. I need you to just start saying my Jets. Own your fandom, buddy.
maybe when we get Trevor Lawrence in April and everybody starts overpaying for the Jets and breaks, I'll call them my Jets. But until then,
I can't wait for
not.
Sam Darnold. I can't wait for Sam Darnold to go 12-4 as the Bears starting quarterback next year. By the way, that's going to be golden. That's going to be amazing.
It's either going to be the Bears or Belichick will take them and turn them around, right?
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! The Patriots win the Super Bowl with Darnold. Here it comes. That would be such a Belichick move. Sorry, point about the Jets. I just get so sidetracked.
Yeah, but just so not to be off on the tangent, but I mean a couple of recent performances. Carr put up 35 points against the Jets last week. A couple weeks ago, Mahomes had 39 and Herbert had 30 against them 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I mean, so team, it's not an issue putting up points there. So I'm not overly concerned about Wilson being able to get there because the track record is there for other players. And even 2 weeks ago, Fitz didn't go crazy, but he put up enough against them to bring us value too.
I do. Hook has chimed in from the peanut gallery. He thinks that Darnold will be the Steelers quarterback. That's pretty interesting. I don't know about that. We'll see about that one. Ben might have something to say about that. Let's move on to running backs. I think we beat quarterback down. I think we will go to our preferred play. I like to put that in there. I think there's just one real preferred play this week. I do like to have at least two, and I do think we think spending up's the way to go. So Herbert and Wilson are our spend-up plays. Taking a look at the running back pool, I do want to pare this down just a little bit. I think those guys are all really reasonable for cash game running backs. But depending upon the makeup of our lineups, I do also think that there's room to pull some of the guys from the cash game lineup. Let's look at that. Who's the most expendable running backs that you would say from the cash pool that you see in front of you? Jones, Eckler, Carson, Montgomery, Taylor, Gaskin, Gordon, and McKissick. Let's say if I wanted to pull two guys from this cash lineup, who are the two guys that you're looking at? And it's like, they're good, but they're just not for me for cash.
I would say Carson and Melvin Gordon.
Okay. Well, we agree on Melvin Gordon for sure.
Okay.
Guy that needs to get pulled. I like him. I just think Philip Lindsay has shown that he's not ready for prime time. He's still probably a little injured, but I'm not. I liked Gordon's price, but I thought that would be if Philip Lindsay were going to be out, but he has no injury designation, so I'm kind of off Gordon. As a viable play. Plus, Carolina's rush defense has been really good 3 of the last 4 weeks. They have
improved.
Yeah. So I do think that. I make the argument for Carson just because of that workload issue. I agree that Carson probably should get pulled off because of the fact that we're using Wilson. But I was going in a different direction on that. But let me hear your thoughts on Carson. Was it simply because we're using Wilson and we're focused on that passing game?
That's part of it. I do prefer the passing game over Carson. If you wanted to go Herbert and you felt Carson was a strong play, I mean, I don't blame you there, but the same token, I mean, I don't see Carson getting a lot of work because I think it'll be a pretty easy game that maybe they, maybe they just take the pedal off the metal a little bit with Carson and spread the ball around in the backfield a little bit. I mean, but also too, depending who's active. Like, I don't know the current status of. Actually, let's take a look while I'm talking about this.
I think all the running backs, maybe Homer might be. I think all the running backs are good to go for Seattle.
Yeah. So Hyde's there and Dallas is there. Homer's not playing, but. I mean, listen, I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of ends up being more of an even split because Carson has been a little banged up.
Oh, for sure.
He's got no injury designation going into this game, which is always a positive sign. But again, it's one of those things that I just think the focus is going to be more on the passing game, and we don't necessarily need to look at the running back area. And also, too, I mean, at 6,900, Carson's a little bit expensive as well.
Well, is there a scenario where you'd use Carson over Eckler in cash? Like, I guess that's what it comes down to for me. I guess if you're using Herbert at quarterback, maybe you'd use Carson perhaps over Eckler. But I think at that point, you're probably just going a completely different direction at running back, right? I mean, you're not – I just don't see a scenario where I'm using Carson over Eckler at the same price point. And we want to – and I don't think we're going to throw 2 7K running backs into cash this week. I don't think that's the direction.
I mean, Frank, and also, too, I mean, just realistically, like in comparison to the other guys you have on that list there, Carson, was the ranked number 7 for me. Like, I'd rather use the other 6 guys on there because of matchups and price. Like,
Makes
again,
sense.
At 6,900 for Carson, I think Eckler's in a better spot. I think Montgomery's in a better spot. So
I agree with that, too.
I just think at that price, well, why go there when I have better options at that same price point?
Just trying to look at the price point, see if there's anyone else in that area. Like, I don't think Robinson is cash viable this week. He's just gotten too expensive.
Yeah.
Kamara, I just can't do it yet. I can't do it until Breeze is back. So I think you're right. I think Eckler at that price point is the guy that we're looking at. Now, what are your thoughts on Aaron Jones? I understand that I think we're both in the same boat where we're strongly considering Devontae Adams for cash. I have my cash core. I think you're in the same boat where you like Adams, but or maybe I'm wrong and you're Aaron Jones this week. Because I think you got to have one of them, but I don't think you should have both in cash this week. Which way? Let's just ask that question. Are you going Aaron Jones or are you going Devontae Adams in cash this week?
I'm going Devontae Adams. I think that even though he's $1,700 more expensive, I just think he's the safer play because we know the volume that Adams is going to get, and for as talented as Jones is, and what he can do, and we know the upside. I mean, last week he hit his value because that 77-yard touchdown, which they all count the same, and those are the types of plays that he can do to get you the points that you need. But at the same token, his usage is just maddening. I mean, they don't use him the way that he should be, and he hasn't gotten 20 touches in a game since week 9. That's not something that you want to see from a guy at this price point. As good as he is and as good of a matchup that it is, just sometimes on the road, weird things happen. Like if the Packers get off to a little bit of a slow start, Detroit is up 14-0 in the second quarter. Now, all of a sudden, Aaron Jones is out of the game. Whether the Packers are up or down, Devontae Adams is not being taken out of the game plan.
That's
and
I'm a volume guy too, right? So if I like to take touchdowns out of the equation and see if they'd even get within like 10 or 15%, or even at 2x, can they get there? Last week he did. If you take the touchdown, now we're going to 77-yard touchdown, and that would really, if he doesn't hit that touchdown, he doesn't come close. But if you just take the 6 point out, all right, he's close to value, but he doesn't hit value. He's over 2x. Against Chicago, he's not there. Against Indianapolis, he wasn't there. Against Jacksonville, he wasn't there. Francisco, Tampa Bay, Atlanta, New Orleans, Minnesota. The only game where, let's see, I got to pull 18 points out of here. He hit value once all year on volume, or even came close to value without on volume alone 1 week. Now it happened to be against the Detroit Lions, who they're facing this week, which is why I think he's not coming out of my cash pool, but he's not a preferred play for me.
Yeah.
Of those players.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, Jones, as we've seen, he's got as high as upside as any other running back in the league. Far and away. I mean, we saw that against Detroit. He put up 46 points against them, so we know what he can do. But for the cash aspect, his floor is a lot lower than we would like to see from a guy at that price. Now, again, sometimes guys at that price, they have duds. I mean, Derrick Henry put up 6 points last week. It happens, but Jones is too consistent on that floor of where he could hit. It's not like, all right, he put up 6 points and it's an anomaly, but the next 3 weeks he's getting 20. Jones is just always fluctuating, and he's just not that safety it's just not that safety you would like to see in a cash environment. I mean, he's your perfect GPP play essentially every week because of his ceiling, but from a cash standpoint, it's just a little too concerning to be confident to have him in there.
I actually think it's enough. I think the GPP is there. Honestly think the concern is enough to pull him out of my cash pool. Like you can put together a cash lineup of running backs with just these 5 guys. Like I think Gaskin's in the conversation. I don't think he needs to be in a cash lineup this week. I mean, for me, it's really the other 4 that I'm deciding between. Those are my 4 big cash guys: are Eckler, Montgomery, McKissick. And I'll be honest, I think Montgomery is. I would have liked to have seen his price go up to $6K instead of $65 from $55 last week. But that matchup against Houston is it's real good, and his volume is definitely there. But I don't think I'm playing him over Eckler, Taylor, and I think McKissick at his price is just too darn good. Is there anyone I'm missing at running back that you think this week?
Let's see where.
Looking that up. Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, no, not from a cash game standpoint. That's basically where I was as well. Is is in that pool. I mean, I really had my focus on 3 guys this week for the most part. I mean, Tony Pollard would have been an interesting play, but it looks like Zeke is going to suit up. So, that's just a little nugget there in case something changes with Zeke over the next day or two if news comes out.
Who are the 3 guys you were referring to then?
Montgomery, McKissick, and Taylor.
Okay, so we're both. So we disagree a little bit on the Eckler end of it, though. I don't think you think Eckler's. Again, I like to say what I think you think instead of just asking you. Do you think Eckler is a good cash game play this week?
Oh, he is. I think the same thing. I think Eckler's in a fantastic spot.
Okay.
I just use my money elsewhere because I'm very confident in those three running backs. And being you have Taylor up on the screen, it's Taylor's last 2 games. I mean, it's starting to look more and more like they're ready to hand things over to him. He's getting better. He seems to be learning the system a little better. And now they get a matchup against the Raiders that, let's face it, the Raiders got torched on the ground last week against 2 guys that weren't even on the Jets opening day roster. Yeah. I mean, these guys are the backups to the backups, and they just ran all over Las Vegas.
I like Ty Johnson, though. I think Ty Johnson actually has some talent. He did well when he played when he was on the Lions when he had a couple of he was a starter. I think I don't think he's a guy that you look at and go, "Oh, that's a 100-yard a game guy." Either. Yeah. It's the Raiders are bad.
But again, I mean, even a guy like Ty Johnson, I mean, you look at it and you say, all right, he couldn't do enough for the Lions to not sign Adrian Peterson, and frankly,
he stay on the practice squad.
Exactly. So just when you see things like that, it just makes you say, all right. Now what's Vegas going to do against one of the better O-lines in the NFL and against the guy like Taylor, who's much better than any of the running backs the Jets have right now?
Jonathan Taylor's snap share has increased a lot, like compared to the other 2 running backs over the last few weeks. He's not at a comfortable level for me. Like he's not pushing 65% even snap share, but he's more than the other 2 guys, and he's starting to get close. He's getting close to where I think where we're not too far off from from moving where he'll get 2 to 1 compared to the other guys combined. Like I do think he's going to be at about 65% snap share. They had him in on a lot of passing downs. Maybe his pass blocking is improving in practice. I don't know because that was one of the big knocks on him. But they had him standing next to Rivers in the gun during passing downs a lot, and he's been dynamic in the pass game. His touchdown was fantastic last week. He put some moves on, made a pretty good catch on the ball, got way open. I know he was wide open on the touchdown pass, but that they keep using him for those 4 targets were great. I do worry that Frank Reich's going to get a little stupid with this, but they're making a playoff push right now, and at this point, he has to know Taylor is his best running back. So I'm hoping for another 16 to 20 touches, and if that's the case against the Raiders, his yards per touch is just too high. He's just too good to sit at 7,000. I'm probably thinking twice about Taylor. Under 6K, I just think he was a slam dunk play for me at running back. I wanted to talk myself out of him so many times. I just couldn't. And then the reason I got McKissick in there, and I think you're in the same boat, is I do think Peyton Barber is going to get about 10 to 12 touches, but McKissick's going to get every bit of passing down work with Antonio Gibson out because Gibson was getting some of the passing down work, and McKissick was getting 8+ targets in most of his games, even with Gibson there. And we may get lucky and see McKissick, especially on drives where they don't want to let the defense substitute. They might keep McKissick inside the 10. Now, I know Barber's more of a goal line type of a back, but McKissick could get some of those inside the 5 carries because he's getting they might run a little more hurry up. Alex Smith definitely seems like he's in control of that offense, and he's not shied away from using McKissick. I think at under 5K, he was a cash game option at under 5K even with Gibson playing. I think without Gibson in there, despite the tough matchup against San Francisco, I just think he's a slam dunk cash play for me this week. He doesn't need to do a ton. So, that's all it is.
Yeah, no, I
you're
agree.
You're reading the chat too, aren't you, Gouda? You're reading the chat too. I see your eyes. Listen, I don't care. I'll throw it right out there. Are we playing into 500 milli? No, because that's not what we're doing. Also, this is cash games. So, understand the difference between cash and GPP. Now, this could very well be one of my friends just in here messing with me. And I do love that there are people in the chat who are defending us, which is great. Why would you take advice from me? Because I'm really good at this. Like I listen, you want to pat myself on the back? I've been nominated 4 times for FSWA awards, including DFS Writer of the Year with guys like Pat Mayo and Justin Van Zuden. Like, I'm good at this. That's why you want to listen to me. If you don't, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. I'll play that game. That's fine. You don't want to listen to me? Don't listen to me. But I'm good at this. So, doesn't cost you anything to listen. But, y'all have fun in the chat. And thanks for the support. Joke's on you, buddy. I live in Vegas and can't play legally. Sucker. All right, sorry. I don't like trolls. So I'm gonna play that game. All right, let's move on to wide receivers since I've angered myself now. It's a good stress relief to let the trolls hear it a little bit sometimes. It's fine. Come to chat. Be here. You give me my clicks. I appreciate it. Troll all you want, guys. That's wonderful. Get my viewership up. Let's take a look at this cash pool. I think we've agreed Davante Adams is our guy. I mean, he's the guy's getting 10 targets a game. I don't like to project touchdowns, but his touchdown equity is higher than any player in the NFL this year. There's no reason not to consider him a high volume Michael Thomas from last year trying to play, even at 9,300. I've not had him in cash far too often this year to make that mistake again. He's just as good as a high volume running back, and I'd rather have him than any of the 8K or higher running backs this week. And it's a great matchup against Detroit, and I think he's a good game because he got injured the last time he played Detroit. I think he's going to want to show him that he's the man.
Yeah,
I have a lot of catching wide receivers in here. I don't think they all belong on this list. I don't like to have a list of about 12 guys. I'd rather have 7 or 8 guys in my cash game list. Who are we polling, Gouda? Who don't you like on this cash list? Because I see some names I'm comfortable polling at this point.
Oh yeah, well we'll start with an easy one. I'll take Amari Cooper out of there.
That was the one I clicked on. I love him in tournaments this week, by the way. Love him, but cash.
Yeah, I mean, at 6,500. I mean, I don't know why he's priced up so high. I'm actually surprised to see that. I guess he's been all right the past couple of weeks.
Dalton likes him.
Yeah,
well, I mean, look at this. I know we're pulling him, but Dalton seems to love him.
Yeah,
he's been good. I mean, he's put up numbers. That's why I got him. Listen, that's why I got him as a GPP play. He scored each of the last 2 weeks. He has 7 or more targets each of the last. He's put up, 14. If he scores that week, he's at 20. It's, but it's this Washington game that tells you a few things. Baltimore's got a good defense, and he got targeted 9 times. Like, I think he's too expensive for cash. I'd consider him at 5,800 in cash, not 65.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I mean, he's Cooper's another guy. He's good. He's got upside. He has somewhat of upside, but he's got same thing. He's kind of like it's kind of like Aaron Jones at receiver. He's the upside is there, but he is just the floor is too low. The floor is too low, and even when Dak was around, I never viewed Cooper as much of a cash play, and I don't think now he is. I don't think now he's too viable either. I mean, I just don't have enough confidence in that Cowboys offense to rely on them in a prime spot. Now, like the flip side, for instance, I would be more likely to have Michael Gallup in my lineup because he's 3,800, and if he only gets you 6 points, he's not killing you.
Similarly good matchup too, though.
Exactly, but if Cooper is giving you 10 points at 6,500, it's torpedoing. Well, not torpedoing, but it's significantly hurting your lineup. And Gallup is getting enough targets to justify a play there too. I just don't think Cooper at that price point is in a spot that you'd want to have him in cash. Yeah, maybe if he was in the mid 5,000s, like the first couple of weeks there with Dalton and all that. Yeah, I would absolutely consider him in there. But with the extra $1,000, I think it's just a little too pricey.
My current cash game build, I actually have Colin Johnson in there at the moment, but I still have $300 left over. I'm very strongly considering going to Gallup. It's really close for me between Colin Johnson and Gallup, just because I think Johnson has got that rapport with Mike Lennon, and he's actually gotten there on volume each of the last 2 weeks where Gallup hasn't. But Gallup's matchup is really good too, and he's clearly the better player, but he actually has more competition for touches. So it's like it's tough for me. I really like the Tennessee-Jacksonville game, and I do think there's a little bit of GPP upside with Colin Johnson, even though I'm using him in cash. I do think there's that GPP upside as well, right? Because you've got to enter your tournament line or your cash laps into GPP. If I can take a moment, and there's some, and I have Corey Davis in there, so I can actually correlate them a little bit for a GPP. all things being equal, I will look to areas where I can get a little bit of bang for my buck and differentiate myself from the field, even in a cash game, because again, we want to enter that into a tournament. But boy, Gallup is tempting at that price. Just the volume is there, and so I think we're kind of on the same page that he belongs there. Who else are you looking at that doesn't? Like, should either Minnesota receiver be there? Should neither Minnesota receiver be there? That's because I've got them both because I like the matchup because Tampa Bay's pass defense has been real weak lately. Who do you like in that respect?
I like both of the Minnesota receivers.
Even on both.
They're both in solid matchups. I mean, Tampa's secondary has really regressed after starting the season off pretty strong, and and on the flip side, Tampa's got one of the top run defenses in the NFL. So if that does slow down Dalvin Cook, then Cousins is going to have to throw it. And the past couple of weeks, Cousins hasn't been afraid to throw. Their defense has left a lot to be desired, and because of that, the receivers have continued to produce. The past 4 weeks, Cousins has thrown it 43, 45, 30, and 36 times, and he's been over 290 yards in each of those games with multiple touchdowns. I mean, these guys are in great spots, and let's not forget too, Minnesota's passing game is Cousins. Minnesota's passing game is Jefferson, Thielen, and Dalvin Cook on the dump offs. There's not much else. There's occasionally a third receiver, occasionally a pass to a tight end, but these guys are seeing over 50% of the targets. So I think they're both going to be extremely viable. I would probably lean Thielen slightly over Jefferson simply because he's $400 cheaper. I mean, other than that, I don't think there's much of a difference between the two guys from that standpoint.
I don't like having both guys in my cash game pool. I just think because in general, one in theory should have the better game than the other. Mm-hmm. I've always been a Thielen guy, and Tampa struggles more against the slot, and that's where I think Thielen does his best work. Jefferson's a great tournament play, and I wouldn't fault you for using him in cash, but I can't have him in my pool. I can't have them both in my pool. The other name that I was looking at my pool, really, I like his production. I'm not sure the volume's there, and I don't love the matchup this week, and that's Tim Patrick. I mean, the guy's good. I don't think I'm being blinded by his 2-touchdown game last week because I liked him prior to the 2-touchdown game. I just think his volume is pretty decent. I'm not sure given the other options. I think I'd rather use Hansen in that spot, Gallup. I'd rather use Boyd at 100 more. I mean, it's a little bit more expensive, but I'd almost rather lean Rashad Perryman now that Jameson Crowder is probably not going to play and Denzel Mims is not going to play. Not that I could play Perryman, but I'm not so sure I can play Tim Patrick in this matchup either. He's got a terrible quarterback. Locke is just so inaccurate. Not sure I feel comfortable with him in the way this pool is made up. I've got enough value at the bottom down here. I'm not sure I need Patrick, but I'm not sure I want to get rid of him either because I do like his role in the offense. What is your opinion on Tim Patrick? I'm going to go back to reading all the fun in the chat while you answer that.
So it's interesting that you're on the borderline of potentially taking Patrick out because I would say out of those 4 value guys, Patrick included, I probably like Patrick the most out of them. I don't know what we might get out of Chad Hansen. He's came out of nowhere last week. I guess he's the de facto number 3 receiver. What the Bears defense is pretty decent. So, what do we see there? How many times Houston's going to throw all day long because they have no running game. So there may be some volume for Hansen there, but I would put him 4th on my list out of those 4 guys. I would definitely prefer Gallup or Colin Johnson over Hansen. And again, as I talked about when we were, on Cooper, I think Gallup's in a better spot. His target share has been a little less, but pretty close to what Amari Cooper is seeing, and he's $3,000 less. So there's potential there for Gallup at that price for sure. And then Colin Johnson has kind of been coming on for Jacksonville. He's developed chemistry with Glennon. My guess would be, they were working together with the 2s or 3s earlier in the season, so they know each other from practice and working as the opposing team's offense during practice and all that. So Johnson's been on the same page with Glennon.
He's a big boy too. Like he's got a good reach.
Is.
Like he's a red zone threat, but he's also gotten those downfield targets, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and listen, he was a he was a good receiver in Texas, and he's definitely got some talent there. I mean, the Jaguars have Jaguars do have some talent there at receiver, and the fact that Johnson's been stepping up a little bit is nice to see. And with DJ Chark back this week, Johnson will have a little less focus on him, which could help things as well.
Chark played last week though too, and Colin Johnson still got his 8 targets. He's got 14 targets over the last 2 weeks, 4 catches each of the weeks. Got a touchdown in there. I mean, he's hit value without the touchdown each of the last 2 weeks on this $3,600 price point, which I think that's why I like him. And Tennessee is awful against the pass. Awful. Yeah. We saw what happened last weekend.
Yeah.
No, that's been a problem all year long.
That they definitely are. But yeah, out of that, I would say from the value wide receivers, I'm most confident either in Johnson or in Patrick. I would say those are my 2 guys. I am targeting.
All good there. Yeah, and I think the other guy that I was talking to, and I think you brought a little bit, but I know I did too, is I love Corey Davis this week. I mean, he's had 10 or more fantasy points in every game this year, 5 or more targets in all but 2 games this year. Jacksonville's terrible against the pass. And Corey Davis has found his role in the NFL as a wide receiver 2 for his NFL team. He was not suited to be the 1, but A.J. Brown has come in there, taken the main coverage, and now you've got Corey Davis getting the off coverage, and that's fantastic for him. He's really shown that he is better than a cornerback 2, not quite as good as a cornerback 1, and he's taking advantage of that this year. And Tannehill's looking for him, and at $5,700, I think the guy's closer to a $6,500 receiver the way he's been playing. At $5,700, he doesn't need much more than 17 points to hit value, and I do think he'll need a touchdown to get there. But Jacksonville's bad; like they give up a ton of touchdowns. They've given up 100 yards in like each of the last 8 weeks, and a lot of that to a wide receiver. And each of that, in a lot of those weeks, it's been to a wide receiver 2 for that team. Justin Jefferson was one of the guys, and there's a number of other guys who were wide receiver 2s who had big games against Jacksonville. So I just think Corey Davis is in the right position. They're using him right this year. So I really do like him. I do think Tyler Boyd is in play too. I know that the quarterback position is terrible for Cincinnati, but Dallas' secondary is awful. And Tyler Boyd had 4 targets last week before he got ejected. And so I just do think they're going to look for him in this matchup. And at $4,900, he is far too cheap for his skill set. I'm not sure I can use him in my own personal cash game, but I sure considered him. But the way that my lineup works, I've got Davis and Adams. I need someone in the lower area here. That's more where my head has been at. And so that's where my cash game lineup looks. Up at this upper level, do you think DK Metcalf and Keenan Allen belong in a cash game conversation, or do you think that they are strictly GPP plays, Gouda?
I definitely think Keenan Allen does because he's at a good price point. We've seen Allen pretty consistently come through based off of this price. 3 out of the past 4 weeks, he struggled a little bit, coinciding with Herbert not being the strongest. But he's still consistently seeing double-digit targets. I mean, the guy has 3 games where he hasn't seen double-digit targets, and 2 of those games were 7 and 8 targets. And he can have a day, just seeing 7 targets, he can have a very strong day. So I think Allen's always got to be in the conversation when there's a strong matchup. And then on DK Metcalf's side,
and the prices come down a little bit the last 3 weeks. The price helps. The price going under 8K helps.
Yes, yeah, and on DK Metcalf's side, I think I'm a little torn on that. I think he might be a little better suited on the GPPs, because it's the same thing every week. Him and Lockett, you never know which one may have the higher target share. I anticipate in this game, going up against the Jets, I don't think that's going to be an issue for either of these guys. I think they should both be fine and get there. But, when you're at $8,400, you're looking for, 25 points. That's, that's not an easy thing to accomplish or to get to, and you're going to need at least one touchdown to get there. And Metcalf does have some pretty good touchdown equity because he can make a lot of plays.
Sure.
I just think he's a little too pricey there to be confident for a cash play. Like, to be honest, if I was looking at Metcalf, I'd go somewhere I'd find the money to get Adams in there if he wasn't already in there. Or honestly,
I had Bills where I had them both in there though. That was where I was looking for a while. I had them both.
Okay, my guess is that's probably a little tough this week. With it, I mean, it's doable, but it may not be.
I had Glennon in it at that point. That was a Glennon lineup. That was when I started looking at Glennon. I don't think you can or should do Wilson and Metcalf in cash, because if a game like last week happens, which it's less likely against the Jets than it was against the Giants, that is far too much money to be sinking into a quarterback wide receiver combo in cash if the Jets do come to play. I do think there's a route to use a hookup, which I will be doing. I will do some correlation with Disley at tight end. I like Disley tight end for GPP purposes, even in my cash lineup, because he's the same price point as the other two guys I like. But I just think I agree with you that Metcalf and it's just too expensive, especially for using Wilson.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. I mean, like I said, I'd rather pay up to go to Adams off of Metcalf if Adams wasn't in my lineup. I'd prefer Allen at 7,700. Or, I mean, listen, if you're looking to spend, I'd probably prefer Tyreek Hill over Metcalf in cash this week.
Yeah, gets a lot of volume. I don't like the matchup against Miami. I'm a big matchups matter guy, and Miami's good. Like, I think Miami's pretty good. I know Hill's a totally different beast.
They are, but
I'm not like shying away from Hill, but for me, he's more of a tournament play. But I understand. I mean, the volume has been ridiculous. Moving on to tight end. Is there a tight end worth spending up for? And by spending up, Gouda, I'm talking about anything above 3K. Like, I don't like any tight end above 3K this week. I know you like this guy.
I do. So
I read your article. I know.
Yeah. So for Schultz, I wouldn't. I probably wouldn't go there for a cash game, although quite frankly, at 3,500 compared to some of the other guys we're looking at, he's only $600 more, and there's enough evidence there to say you can use Schultz in cash. So what I found looking into it, one, the Bengals have been terrible all year against the tight end. They've allowed the third most fantasy points per game to the position. Last week, Gesicki had 9 catches for 88 yards and a touchdown on 11 targets. And then 2 weeks ago, Evan Ingram, who's been pretty quiet all year, went 6 for 129 on 9 targets. Teams, these offensive coordinators, they're not dumb. They know the best way to go against these teams. And the Bengals have a big hole in the middle of the field, especially against tight ends. On Schultz's end, he's had 5 targets in 4 of the last 5 games. So there's definitely some volume there for him. And inside the red zone, he's got a target share of 15.4%, which is tied for second on the team. So when they pass inside the red zone, they're looking his way, and they try to get him the ball when the matchup is right for it. And I think this is a good matchup for him this week, and where it is, I think there's a lot of upside there for Schultz this week, especially if he can get in the end zone. I mean, he can easily approach 15 points with some of this volume that he gets.
I do like that. Is there anyone else at tight end that you like, since I forced Schultz onto you in this conversation? Is there someone you actually do like at tight end above that 2,900? Because right now in cash, I'm looking at Kmet, Akins, and Disley, and I think they're all fine. I'm using Disley because I want to get the correlation with Wilson. He's coming off his best game of the year, and the Jets are the worst team against the tight ends in the league. But the other two are fine? Is there someone else that you would look at besides those?
I mean, the only other place I would go if I'm not using one of those 3 cheap guys, I would spend all the way up, and I would use Kelsey. If you look at what Kelsey is doing this year, his numbers are pretty close in a lot of ways to being on par with Devontae Adams, and he's $1,900 cheaper. I mean, his target share is among the highest in the NFL. The guy's number 2 in receiving yards in the NFL this year, which is unbelievable to think for a tight end. Before we came on air, you were telling me that he's the second most receptions of 15-plus yards over the past 3 years, which again,
is sick.
Insane for a tight end.
Yeah,
and
that's an all wide receiver. That's an all pass catchers, not just tight
not just tight ends, all pass catchers. So I mean, he's just been on a streak, and when Mahomes is hot like this, Kelsey pays off big time. And sometimes he goes overlooked because it's the tight end position and because they have Tyreek Hill and he's the flashy, shiny toy. But, I mean, Kelsey is as good, if not better in a sense, as a football player than Tyreek Hill. And, like I said, with what Kelsey is doing and how often he gets to 3X, even on this salary of $7,400, I mean, it's a great spot to go. So if you want to be a little different on your cash builds and pay up on tight end, I mean, Kelsey is as viable as they come. Personally,
if you're looking at wide receivers in that range, I'd rather use Kelsey above Hopkins, Lockett, Michael Thomas. I mean, he's a wide receiver one. Like, he puts up wide receiver one numbers. Like, he's really good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, ultimately it comes down to if you're very confident in using two of those cheap wide receivers, then go with Kelsey. I mean, because Kelsey is, far and away the best tight end play.
Cool. I agree with that. I like Kelsey. I'm off Waller this week. I was off him last week, and I was dumb because matchups matter. If matchups matter, Indianapolis really good against tight ends, and Waller's only hit value on this number on a 6,800 price. Waller's only hit value 3 times all year, whereas Kelsey's hit value 7, 8, 9 times. He's hit 7 times. 7 times he's hit 22 and change this year, and his average for Kelsey is almost hitting value. It's filthy. The numbers are filthy. Waller, I just don't think is in that same category. So you're right. If you're spending up, that's where it is. Otherwise, it's the other 3. I do think Aiken's the riskiest of the bunch, though Chicago's not great against tight end. Texans gives up a lot of volume tight end, but they're not giving up a ton of points overall, like touchdowns and whatnot. But Kmet has taken over the tight end one position for Chicago, coming off his best game of the season last week. But I just think the Jets are so bad against the tight end, and this is a way I can correlate Wilson in my cash game lineup, so it's still a little more GPP friendly in the same way I'm using Colin Johnson to correlate with Corey Davis. All things being equal, and I think they are at tight end, I'll take the correlation because it's not going to kill me if the Jets have a great game. I mean, it's just as likely that Akins and Kmet have a dud of a game, but if Wilson goes to Disley, that upside potential is much higher.
And also too, one more thing on the tight end spot. I mean, last year, it basically got to the point in the season where when a tight end was up against the Cardinals, you just locked them in because they were basically guaranteed double-digit points, let alone maybe going off. So for comparison, last year the Cardinals to tight ends give up 19.9 fantasy points a game, and they allowed 16 receiving touchdowns. Right now, the Jets have given up 11 receiving touchdowns to tight ends on the year, and they've given up 17.7 fantasy points a game to tight end. So they're pretty much in.
Let's go Disley.
I mean they're pretty much in that realm of what the Cardinals were last year. So I think that puts, out of the 3, I think for me that puts Disley at the top of those 3. But I think any of them are viable. I think just the reason to maybe have Disley at the top of the list, given the matchup and where it stacks up versus what we've seen last year.
Getting Disley with it, I love it. Tight end defense. We don't spend up on defense. Saints have been great this year. I'm just not spending up on defense. Seahawks have a great matchup. I just don't think I can spend up that much for defense. I like Carolina against their pressure rate has been ridiculous lately. And they got Drew Lock, who's ridiculously inaccurate and turns over the ball a ton. But I'm locked in on the Giants at $2,600, assuming I can afford that. And I don't, we can go to Dallas or even Jacksonville at a lower price, or even Minnesota. But I think the Giants are just better than $2,600. They've got 2 or more sacks in every single game this year. They forced 2 or more turnovers in 3 of the last 4 games. They've scored 4 or more fantasy points in all but 1 game this year. They've given up under 20 points in 3 straight games, and they've given up 22 points or less in all but 4 games this entire year. And oh, by the way, Arizona has not been playing great on offense. Kyler Murray is not running. When he's not running, he's not overly dynamic. He's not an overly he's an accurate passer, but he's an accurate passer because he's throwing short passes. Look at his average yards per completion the last 3 weeks: 6.4, 5.0, 4.4. He's thrown an interception 3 last 4 weeks. He fumbled twice last week. He's not running at all. Team's just not as good when Kyler Murray's not being that dynamic quarterback. On the road, early game, East Coast, West Coast team. Giants are playing well. Giants aren't a good team, but they're surely a good defense. They are a playoff caliber defense. They're one of the best in the league. The Giants right now remind me of the way I felt about Miami about 6 weeks ago, their defense, 7 weeks ago. They're just an overlooked defense that's priced too low, and despite the matchup, I think they're in for a good spot. The game that I'm really thinking of with Miami is the week that the Rams traveled east.
Oh yeah,
played the Dolphins in an early game, and Miami had been coming off a decent run games. I'm trying to pull up the Miami defense just to see what week that was. Week 4, 5, 6, somewhere in that range. And they held the Rams. They crushed the Rams in that game, and their defense played great against the Rams. That was week. They had 2 sacks, 4 turnovers, which obviously is not overly realistic. 20, but let's look at what else happened earlier in the year. And this game is what really me and said, okay, this defense is okay. I get that Seattle put up, they gave up a lot of yards in the second half, but that first half against Seattle, when Seattle went in, and everyone said this was going to be a game that Seattle passed all over them, and they ended up doing it because Miami kept it close. But that game against Seattle, Miami played a really strong first half, and they held Seattle down, and Seattle had to really pick it up in the second half. Anyway, but we're not talking about the Dolphins, why I like the Dolphins this week, though it is a reason why I think Kansas City is not particularly cash game viable. But the Giants remind me so much of that defense. A lot of pressure, a lot of turnovers, not giving up a lot of points. They've got that West Coast team that's struggling on offense right now with a quarterback who just isn't great when he's not running. Just going into New York and putting it's going to be a rough matchup for them. So
yeah, $2,600. And again,
I like the Giants.
Yeah, and like you said, Murray's not running. He's only had 5 rushing attempts each of the last 3 weeks, and this is actually, I was just looking at it, and it's quite shocking actually. Murray's only thrown for more than 300 yards twice this year.
That's
he's not even doing that much passing, like you said. It's like it's the low A dot, and he's just not throwing it downfield. And I don't know if it's they don't trust Christian Kirk getting open, they're not calling plays for him, or if Kingsbury is just outsmarting himself.
Yeah, it's they've had a couple of games where he went long to Kirk and he had good games, but a lot of his values come from his legs and those rushing touchdowns. And when he's not getting them, it's not there. And I think if he's going to try to run around too, the Giants are going to bottle him. They're going to contain him. They did it last week with Wilson. They held Wilson down. And we've seen Kyler Murray have some games where he's running around and getting hit a little bit. So I love the Giants. Like if I can get him in my cash lineup, I'm locking him in. Let's move on real quick to GPPs. Just like we do with our normal play, we like to go 80-20 cash to GPP. The amount of time we spend in this live stream, cash to GPP, we very little time in the GPPs. We hit that very hard Sunday mornings. We just want you to get your cash game lineup strong going into the weekend. As more information comes out in terms of expected ownership, injuries, then we can start to see where we can leverage the field in GPPs. So right now is kind of where my head is at for a GPP. I really like Seattle, and I think Rashad Perryman is the obvious run back with the Jets receivers struggling. I love Tennessee, Jacksonville, just stacking up that game. I think Minnesota makes a lot of sense, and I'm running back both Mike Evans at only $6,600. I think he's a great one-off in that matchup. And Rob Gronkowski, who Brady's throwing him the ball. I think he's just real comfortable with Gronkowski, and I like him at $4,800. And I think, obviously we're going to have a Mahomes stack because we do every chance we can, and I love Mahomes. I love a Mahomes stack when I can get a Mahomes stack. But I also happen to really like this Dallas Cowboys Cincinnati Bengals game. I referenced it in the cash game side. I just think the total of 43 is too low, considering how terrible both defenses are. And you can get Gallup and CeeDee Lamb at 4,800, and you can get Tyler Boyd at 4,900. And while Cooper's a little expensive at 6,500, I have no problem using him in a mini stack with Boyd in a GPP. I'm probably not going heavy on this game. I will have a Dalton's double stack where we, get 2 of the Cowboys receivers and 1 of the Bengals receivers. But for the most part, I'm looking mini stack on that game. And that's really where my head is mostly at. It's Seattle, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Minnesota, with the Tampa Bay double run back. Kansas City for sure with value wherever I can find it. And then a little bit of Dallas and Cincinnati mini stacks. Where's your head at for a GPP this week, Buda?
So again, I mean, I don't think we're inventing the wheel here or anything. I'm pretty similar with where you are. Obviously liking Seattle. I don't know if on the Seattle game I'll do a bring back. I haven't.
I just think the pass defense is so bad for Seattle.
Yeah,
and
there's
Dunlap, since Dunlap has shown up, the Seattle defense has gotten a lot better, but he might not play this week because he hasn't been practicing. Yeah. So I think if that pass rush slows down a little bit, I do think they're going to try to take some shots with Perryman. And
listen, the Jets are going to have to pass. The Jets probably going to have to pass it 40 times anyway, so somebody should be viable. And with Mims out, I mean that really narrows it down. Becomes either Perryman or Crowder.
Crowder's out.
Crowder's out now too.
Most likely, he didn't practice all week. He's most likely. That's what I'm saying. Perryman is the $3,900. He's just the easy play. He's an easy play.
I totally missed that Crowder news. All right, so yeah,
came out later. It came out right before he went on the air.
Okay, so Perryman makes a lot of sense then there too. Yeah. I'm really into the Titans this week as they look to be a nice lower owned option, especially off of a little bit heavier owned Derrick Henry. I'm really into the Chargers. All the reasons I spoke about Herbert before. Plus Allen and Williams, at receiver both have very strong matchups there. Really like the Minnesota side in that game too. Again, because I think Dalvin Cook is going to struggle in this one. And I'm really into Tampa's passing game this week. I don't know if it's me being bludgeoned by Brady for 19 years or as a Jets fan or what, but when Brady gets into these ruts or they come off a bye week, they come off a loss, and Brady just comes out and just shows no mercy on the team he's up against. We've been waiting for the Antonio Brown week. I've been waiting for the Chris Godwin week. And
I'm going Mike Evans, right?
And you're going Evans. You're a little more on Evans and Gronk. I'm on the other side. I'm more with Godwin and Brown. But I think this Minnesota Tampa game is going to have tons of scoring. I think we're going to see a shootout there. I think Cousins gets it done. I think Brady gets it done. The Minnesota side, like I said before, it's easy. We know it's Jefferson. We know it's Thielen. There's not much else there in the passing game. Tampa, it's a little dicey. Again, because there's 4 viable guys, and you throw in Ronald Jones, you throw in Scotty Miller. There's a lot of targets there. There's a lot of guys that play. I'm putting my chips on Godwin and Brown this week, and based on the guys that they'll be matching up on, and I do think Godwin's the number 1 receiver there. Evans has outplayed him slightly the past couple of weeks. I do think Godwin is the number 1 there. I think this bye week is going to help get some of the cobwebs out. I think we see Tampa come out. I think we see them come out really strong. And again, let's not forget Minnesota's pass defense is nothing. There's nothing there.
You brought up an interesting angle before we came on the air about this Tampa game, and it was in that form of Ronald Jones. Do you want to just kind of because I have him on our one-off pool down here? If I can slide down there, because we know my computer runs so fast. Probably because I'm not entering the $500 milli maker, and that's can't afford that nice computer, I guess. Trolls get to me way too much, Gouda. Don't worry, I got an anti-troll moment coming up at the end of the show. I got Ronald Jones as a one-off play. You want to talk about him just a little bit about why you brought him to my attention? Because I was thinking about him and I wasn't sure I could pull the trigger. And then you mentioned him, and I was like, okay, I think I'm feeling a little bit better about Jones. Why did you bring him?
Yeah, so for one, I looked at Jones as a decent one-off. One, because of his price range. There's not many guys in that price range I think are going to be used this week, let alone higher owned. I think he's a good pivot off of David Montgomery, who's 6,500, who's going to be very well owned. And don't get me wrong, Montgomery's in a very strong spot. It's just that Jones lower owned. Jones is out there. Jones sees 70% snap share. He sees 70% usage rates. Leonard Fournette has become a guy that Jones is out there 15 straight plays. All right, Fournette, get out there and give him a breather for 2 downs. This has become Jones's backfield. And again, like I was talking about with Aaron Jones, Ronald Jones' floor is just as low as anybody out there, but we've seen his upside this year. He has progressed. He has become a better running back, and it's showing. And again, for the same reason that everybody's going to be on the Minnesota passing game. It's looking like with Dalvin Cook being a fade at his high price, and everybody's definitely looking at the Tampa passing game, and Jones is going overlooked. And if this is a game that Tampa gets out, it could become a Ronald Jones game. If Tampa's out up by 3 touchdowns, Jones, sees more work, and he's a very good one-off. I mean, listen, there's even plenty of ways where, Jones puts up 25 fantasy points and all of the passing game goes off as well. I mean, if enough points are scored here and there's enough usage through Tampa's, higher-paced offense, Jones has plenty of ways to get there.
For sure. And, if you look at what Minnesota's been playing early in the year, it was their rush defense wasn't very good either, but pass defense really bad. Their pass defense has improved slightly, but their rush defense is still pretty bad. They give up 100 yards or more in a lot of games. Games they're winning, games they're losing. It doesn't matter. They give up a lot of their defense is just not very good. And so Tampa Bay, Brady loves to when he gets inside the 5, he loves to hand the ball off. I know he'll take that little sneak from the 1, but oftentimes he'll line up in the gun and he'll just hand the ball off, and he'll just hand it off 3 times until it gets in there. And Jones could benefit from that. Again, the floor is low, but the ceiling, I think, is really high as well. And I think the matchup's good. And again, one of our big staples of GPPs is, see what everyone else is doing, do the other thing. If everyone's going passing game and there's viable, a reason to think that the running game could be useful, use the running game instead. And I think that's a real good way to go. I'm not using him in a stack in this game, but I'll use him as a one-off in a different lineup as opposed to someone else a little chalkier at that price point. So I do think Ronald Jones makes some sense there. Is there anything else that I know we're going to talk about it Sunday. I've got my GPP article coming out tomorrow. You just released your leverage article at banksterdfs.com for anyone who wants to see it. Any other GPP areas we should be really looking at? I mean, obviously, again, Mahomes always goes under-owned, and we just seem to keep riding him. So is there any GPP that you think that we should be taking a look at?
I mean, the only other thing that I think is playable or something that I'll do, it's my obligatory Phillip Rivers with Jonathan Taylor stack. Like I've said the past couple of weeks, Rivers has been productive. Most weeks he's pretty close to that 3.5 to 4x. We've seen that from Jonathan Taylor his past 2 games. And there's no. I mean, Pittman's kind of the number 1 receiver, but there's no real number 1 threat there. Rivers just
Hill looked pretty good last week.
He did. I mean, I don't know if it's going to continue or not. I personally bank on Rivers spreading it around and just kind of having none of his pass catches with him. I mean, listen, if Hilton's the guy that's coming on, so be it. I just don't know if I can take the 2.5 weeks that he's been well compared to the rest of the season where he looked lost.
Rivers has got volume the last few weeks, and he's putting touchdowns. He's
passing.
Looking good. And I know you love running Rivers naked or with a running back. It's a real contrarian way to look at it.
And again too,
they're cheap.
They're cheap with what it gives you. It allows for options on a multitude of mini stacks. And I don't know if there's anybody on Vegas that I want to, run it back with or throw it in there. But,
Aguilar, baby. Aguilar getting all the targets.
Yeah.
Maybe they start throwing a rug again too. Rugs. Listen, if they blitz all 11 guys like the Jets, Rugs can finally score again.
Hey, maybe.
You beat Indy deep, though. You beat Indy through the pass deep. That's the only thing that they're a little weak on. And if Aguilar is going to see Rhodes, then you run Ruggs deep. But you're right. There's no natural run back. You run Rivers, Taylor, and then you just go with other stacks. Yeah, that's cool. No, it works. They're cool. And listen, Sunday morning we're going to talk a lot more about our GPP plays. Like I said, the article's not written yet. The pool's kind of there, but dirty little secret. Things that just don't have words ready. So, and that's why we do that Saturday. We like to cash on Friday night and GPP Sunday morning. So, I think we're in a good spot, Good. I like where we're at this week. I think this week seems. I think cash is pretty well locked in this week. I feel like we're in a real safe place for cash this week. Okay. Thought we went dead. Went dead for a second. My internet's wonderful. Anyway, we were talking about cash lineups. Cash line feels good, feels safe, feels wonderful. Folks, you can find us at Bankster DFS. I mean, it was a weird stream with all those trolls. Listen, I do have to say trolls, by the way. Listen, I'm not one to fight. I'm not one to argue. I'm humble. I let it go. But listen, get one of these trolls. Get one of these 2017 FSWA Hockey Writer of the Year. Get one of these.
There you go.
Talk to me about what I'm doing or not doing. That's what you can do, trolls. I've never played that card before, but I'm playing it today. One troll me, you get an FSWA Writer of the Year award. Then you tell me from a little site. I'm not Roto Grinders. I'm not RotoWire. I'm not Elite. I mean, great sites, but I'm just little old Doug from Bankster DFS. You come talk to me when you get one of those. Poor Good is going to sit there and roast me. I can't wait to go into Slack Jags and be like, Doug was so full of himself. He's the troll. Sometimes the ego, man. Sometimes the ego just gets beat up with like, you're a fraud. It's like,
no, hey, you're
right. I'm not playing a $500 million trade. That's I'm a teacher. I'm but a humble teacher, friends. This is what I do. This is the passion project. You can join us in all this irreverence at banksterdfs.com. $3.99 a week. You get everything we cover, all the sports we cover. We cover them all: major sports, college sports, pro sports, niche sports, whatever it is. You can find Gouda's fantastic work for best ball. You can find his work for our weekly leverage play, and he'll talk about any sport. Gouda doesn't care. He loves sports. We got a great team of players, of writers and experts and members and friends in our Slack chat. Daily articles, daily player pools, banksterdfs.com. Under $4 a week, $3.99 a week, and that covers everything. It's no hidden fees, no hidden anything. One payment, you cover it all every single week. We'll take care of you. Make sure that on this YouTube page you like, share, subscribe, click the notification icon. Let us know what you think in the comment section, and we'll let you know when we go live every Friday night, 7 o'clock Eastern, every Sunday morning, 11:30 a.m. And that is when we will see you next, 11:30 a.m. Sunday morning, getting you ready for the Week 14 NFL slate, when we will have a lot more for GPPs. We'll lock in our cash cores, and we'll let you know where we're going. Gouda, you have yourself a wonderful week. I'm sure I'll see you in Slack soon enough. Everyone else, thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll
take care, everybody.